Hi you guys, welcome back to Rocket City Yardstead. I'm Sarah, and today I am going to make lasagna. And I was about to pull out some canned tomatoes that I have put away, but then I remembered that I had about 2.5 of these gallon-sized bags of Amish paste tomatoes in the freezer, and I thought this would be a great way to utilize those and cook them down into sauce for the lasagna, and I thought I'd bring you all along with me. So in this pot here, I already have put one of the full bags and the half bag, and now I'm going to go ahead and add this one. So in here, I've added just a little bit of water, maybe about half a cup to help the tomatoes get going. And I have it on a fairly low heat, and I'm going to put a lid on and let these steam and start to thaw a bit. The water is just to help prevent anything from burning in the bottom. I thought I would bring you all in here to where I have my started plants going and just give you a peek. These are peppers that I started, I think it's been like 3.5 weeks ago now. Some of them are still germinating. I've still had peppers pop up as recently as yesterday, but some of them are getting quite big and they look quite nice. And then down here, I have some basil plants and tomatoes. Some of these I need to up pot. If you can see right there, there's 3 Cherokee purple tomatoes in that one cell. And so I'm going to need to pull those apart and put them in their own pots. I also have tomatillos and eggplants. Starting to worry that I'm going to have to restart some of those because they're not coming up, but we'll just see. I may give them a few more days. Here you can see into my pot, and my tomatoes have thawed enough that they're all now down into the liquid, although they're definitely still frozen tomatoes in here. So I've taken the lid off. I turned the temperature up just a little bit, and I'm going to let these sit here on the stove and continue to thaw and cook and let them reduce down a lot. So now that the tomatoes are going on the stove, I thought I would take you guys along with me. I need to get a couple things out of some of my storage, and I thought I would show you how I store some of my preserved foods. If you're anything like me, you might live in a place where basements aren't very common, and that can make finding places in your home to put your preserved foods really kind of difficult. So one of the ways that we have accomplished that, and I'm going to flip you all around, is we got this cabinet at an estate sale. And it's really nice. I think it was a TV cabinet, which is sort of ironic since I have a TV sitting on top of it. But it just looks like a nice piece of furniture sitting in this room. And then you open it up, and our neighbor helped us cut shelves to size. And so we added 3 extra shelves to the cabinet. I drilled in extra holes for the pegs to hold the cabinet, or to hold the shelves, I mean. And so we have all of this nice storage space for a lot of our canned goods. Now, in particular today, what I'm looking for is freeze-dried basil and the little bit of freeze-dried oregano I have left over. So the tomatoes have been simmering here for several hours, and they're cooked down really nicely. They're just about where I want them. I'll give you a peek at them in just a second. But so while these just finish off reducing a little bit more, I have a couple of pounds of Italian sausage here in this pot that I'm browning up. I did 1 pound of medium Italian sausage and 1 pound of hot, and that way the spice level will come out somewhere in the middle. And then once this is browned up just a little bit, I'm going to add an onion that I chopped up earlier today. And then we will get the tomatoes run through the blender so that the skins and the seeds just are blended up really nice and smooth and with the tomato pulp. Here you can see what the tomatoes are looking like. They started somewhere around a little over 6 quarts when they thawed, and now they're down to just slightly over 3 quarts. So this was a ton of liquid that cooked off over the course of the last several hours. Here you can see the sausage is getting nice and brown. I do want to allow it to get some browning color on it, not just the meat turn brown, but where it's begun to caramelize a bit on the outside. But I can go ahead and add my onions at this point and let them start softening up. Just get them mixed in. We'll let that sit there and the onions soften and the sausage brown some while I blend tomatoes. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this pot over here where my blender is and start working on getting these tomatoes pureed up. Oh, you know what I need? I need a ladle. This a stir while I'm over here. I think turn the temperature down a little bit as well on this pork. Okie dokie, time for the tomatoes. I know that these high-speed blenders are quite the investment, but if you don't have one and you can save up for one, I just got mine last summer and I don't think I fully appreciated how amazing what they're able to do compared to a conventional blender is, as far as just really genuinely pulverizing everything. Okay. Oh, and because these are hot, I do want to grab a towel to put over the hole. Okie. I'm just going to start this on low and then turn it up a bit higher. A peek. Oh yeah, that looks great. I'm really happy with that. As you can see, there's quite a bit of browning here in the bottom of my pot, and that's all going to be really yummy flavor. So I am going to add some wine. Normally I would add red wine, but I don't have any. So white wine will do just fine. Maybe half a cup. And I am going to use that to scrape up those flavorful brown bits into our sauce. And off the pan. And it'll just add an extra nice acidic layer to the sauce, as well as getting us all that yummy flavor from those browned bits. Now with all the brown bits scraped up, I'm going to go ahead and add that first pitcher full of tomato and then get back to blending up the rest of my tomatoes. So here you can see how nice and smooth that sauce is, and there's just no signs of the seeds and the skins in it, which is really lovely. This is the last batch I needed to run through the blender, and so I am just adding it in to my pot. This made a really nice amount of sauce. I think certainly enough for 2 lasagnas, and maybe even extra that I could put in a container and freeze for another meal. That would be fantastic. Now that all of the tomato sauce is in the pot, I'm going to go ahead and start seasoning it up and giving it that yummy Italian pasta sauce flavor. So I'm going to add a couple teaspoons of salt. It might need more because it's such a big pot. Some black pepper. I do tend to be one of those people who cooks by taste and will adjust as needed. So sometimes you have to add more later. I am going to add just a little bit of red pepper flake, but not too much since there's that 1 pound of spicy sausage in there. Some oregano from my garden that I freeze dried last year. And actually, I was so excited. I went out into my garden earlier today to look for something and saw that my oregano was coming back from last year. So I'm very excited about that. I'll be able to put up some more because this was the first year I had this plant, and so it didn't get super large and I didn't have a ton to put up. But hopefully in its second year, it's going to give me more. Next, I'm going to add some of my freeze-dried basil. And this I just crunch up. And if you don't have freeze-dried herbs, you can absolutely use fresh if you want. You can use just the regular dried ones. But this is just how I happen to have my stuff preserved. And some garlic. I have some store-bought minced garlic I need to use up. So I'm going to start with that. And then I also want to add some onion powder. And garlic powder as well. I also quite like how balsamic vinegar tastes in this, just maybe a tablespoon or 2. It just adds a nice depth of flavor. My balsamic vinegar is quite thick, and so it takes a little while to get it out of the pot, out of the bottle. I'll just stir that all in. And let this cook down for a little bit and let the flavors marry, and then give it a taste test to see if it needs any additional flavoring, any more seasonings or anything. While the sauce is simmering down and all those flavors are melding, I'm going to make the next element of the lasagna. So this lasagna will have something like a bechamel. I'm calling it faux bechamel. I don't know if there's actually technically a sauce that has a name for what I'm going to make. I don't tolerate milk very well, but I do okay with cream. And so I have figured out that in this lasagna recipe, it works really well to substitute about 3/4 of the milk with chicken broth and then do the rest with the cream. And it's still really creamy and luxurious and it tastes wonderful, but my stomach's not going to be upset later. So that's a really big deal. So all the sauce is going to take is some chicken broth, butter. I'm using some 1-to-1 gluten-free flour, some nutmeg, and the cream. So it's really simple and not a whole lot of ingredients. The first thing I need to do is get the butter melting. Now that my butter is melted, I am going to add about 6 tablespoons of flour. I'm eyeballing this too. This is a fairly large spoon. Ooh, making a mess. I'm just gonna stir this in and get it all incorporated with the flour, with the butter, and let it cook for a couple of minutes just to get rid of that raw flour flavor. I don't have any made up at the moment, but I make my own oat flour and it works really well in this application as well. So while this is just cooking for a minute, I am going to get my chicken broth open. I love it when there's a good pop on my broth. You know, it's sealed really well when it does that. Give my tomato sauce a stir. Okay, this is looking good. So I'm going to slowly add in about 3 cups of this broth. It's the best thing about a mason jar is that you can look at the measurements on the jar. Just stir this in and get the broth and that roux all nice and incorporated together. And I'm going to go ahead at this point and add some salt, but not a whole lot because that chicken broth is salted. So maybe just a half a teaspoon. And just a little bit of nutmeg. And now that that broth's in there, I'm going to turn the temperature up a little bit. And I'm just going to let this cook until it starts to thicken. And once it starts to thicken, I will add the cream at the end. So this is thickening up nicely. So I am going to turn the temperature down some. And I'm going to go ahead and add the cream And I think if you're wondering about the flavor from the chicken broth, especially in a recipe like this where there's so much flavor from the marinara sauce, is that what it's called? You know, it's a tomato meat Italian sauce. Forgive me if you're Italian and you know official names. But there's just so much flavor in there with the garlic and the onion and the herbs and everything that honestly, I don't even notice the chicken broth flavor at all. But you get this really lovely, nice, creamy texture. And it's just a nice way to achieve that without having to use a milk alternative. There you have it, this really nice, lovely bechamel sauce that's going to go into our lasagna. Now that both of my sauces are ready, I'm ready to assemble my lasagna. So for lasagna, I like to use the Jovial brown rice lasagna. It's really good, really flavorful. It's a pasta you can use from dry. And so, where'd it go? The first thing I need to do is spray these with some oil. And I have misplaced my spritzer. It was hiding behind my tripod. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just spritz these with some oil. This is just a refillable spritzer that you can fill with whatever kind of oil you would like. I use just a light olive oil. Okay, so now I am going to put a nice layer of the tomato sauce in the bottom of each of these pans. Get it nice and spread out. This is one of those things where there is a recipe on the back of the Jovial box for lasagna. And I don't actually follow the recipe, but I try and make sure that my liquid quantities are in the same amounts as what that recipe calls for, especially since I'm using dry noodles to make sure that my lasagna has plenty of moisture to absorb and cook all the way through in the oven. Okay, so next it's time to put lasagna sheets in. I don't know what that is. Okay. Lasagna. Oh, this foil pan is just perfect for 3 lasagna noodles. 1, 2, 3, 4. This pan is a little bit longer, so I let them overlap a little bit and do 4. I'm gonna have to make some more room here so I can have room for the bechamel. Okay, bechamel sauce. We're just gonna do a thin layer of bechamel on each lasagna. The first time I made this, I gave it a try because just like with the milk, I was not tolerating ricotta very well. And the only kind of lasagna I'd ever had was the kind you make with ricotta cheese. And I didn't tell my mom that I was making lasagna this way until after we ate it. And she was like, I would never have known it didn't have a layer of cheese in it. So that was really encouraging. If you're curious about how it holds up to maybe a more traditional American style lasagna. This is going to need a little bit more. I'm afraid this might not be enough bechamel, but we'll find out. I can always make some more if I need to. Okay. And some more of our tomato sauce. I forgot to record it when I did, but I did taste test the marinara and it needed a little bit more acid. So I added a little bit more of the balsamic vinegar, but I also added about a tablespoon of red wine vinegar, and that made it just right. Lasagna is definitely one of those things that it pays off to make more than one at a time, isn't it? Like this part doesn't really take all that much time compared to making the sauce and everything. The assembling is probably the fastest part. And one of these lasagnas will feed us for 4 meals. So right here, even though this took me quite a bit of time, this is 8 dinners when there's only 2 people in the house, which is fantastic. Okay. I like to add a little bit of Parmesan cheese at this point in between the layers. So I'm just going to do a little sprinkling of that. Not a whole lot, but just a little. Oh, that was a big handful. There we go. And then more noodles. This foil pan gets a little bit wider as it goes up, so I am going to try and break a noodle. That did not go super well, but it went just fine. It'll be in the middle of the lasagna and nobody will ever know. You guys aren't going to tell on me, right? 3, 4. Benny, you leave that alone. My kitty cat is exploring, trying to figure out what I dropped on the floor. So here we go with some more bechamel. Okay. Get this spread out. If I can get a little bit more out of this pot. I think it's been a little bit since I've made this, and I was making bechamel from memory, and I couldn't remember how much exactly I used. I think I would, in future, maybe do a batch and a half. But this will be just fine for this go round. Some more sauce. I am definitely looking forward to dinner tonight, you guys. Little more Parmesan. And another layer of noodles. And to open another box. Two, three, four. Okay. We're gonna top this layer with our marinara. Is it still marinara if it has meat in it, or is there a different name for it? I know it's not a bolognese because it doesn't have carrots and stuff like that. But if you know, let me know, because I'm not 100% sure what to call this. A ragu, maybe? I think that might be the word. Okay. So now I'm just gonna top these with some mozzarella, and the one we're gonna eat for dinner tonight will be ready to go in the oven. And the other one I will let finish coming down to room temperature, and I will wrap it up and put it in the freezer. I want to make sure I have enough cheese for both lasagnas. I guess the second one I could always get some more cheese later and add some more if I need to. Yeah, this one will need a little bit more later maybe. But 2 lasagnas. Yay! So now I'm going to put this one in the oven after I put some foil over the top, and then it will bake for about an hour. I haven't been out in the garden with you guys in a bit, and so I thought I would come out and just give you a little bit of an update while I'm out here picking a salad to go with dinner. So as you can see, there are a good number of weeds, but my peas are doing quite well. They are about halfway to the trellis, I think. Here's the kale. The spinach. The spinach has not loved how warm we have been on and off the last few weeks. Here's the hole where I think a bunny is trying to build a nest. And here is my beautiful butter crunch lettuce that's looking so good. Here is a secondary patch of cilantro. I'm actually going to walk you around over there. Oh, but first, look at the chives blooming. I think chive blossoms are just so beautiful. Even if I didn't like chives, I would be tempted to eat them. Here's my parsley. Now this is parsley I planted last year, so it will definitely go to seed at some point this year and I need to replace it. But when I cleaned these trellises off, there were a bunch of cilantro seeds still on the plants, and I just sprinkled them about, and there are just hundreds of cilantro down here in the bottom of this bed. That right there is a baby rutabaga, so I'm very excited that at least some of them are coming up. I definitely see maybe a handful of them, so for a first time, that's not terrible. I know there were some beets in here. We had a really hard freeze later than normal, and we had been up around 80. So I'm not seeing any beets. I think they might have got frozen. I know some of my radishes took some damage from the frost. I covered a lot of things when that happened, but I didn't have enough things to cover everything. And then here is where I said I was going to sow lettuce thickly to try and fill this space in so it wouldn't be full of weeds. And in some places that obviously worked really well, but in others it's much more spotty. But there is still quite a bit of baby lettuce down here, so hopefully some more will germinate. Does anybody have any tips on thinning, or I guess separating might be the right word, chive patches? Some of these patches seem quite large, and I think maybe they're ready to be separated out, but I'm not sure when you're supposed to do that or how exactly, and I need to do some research on it. But if you have any tips, I would be grateful. So here's a tip from my fellow gardeners if you haven't thought of it, which I'm sure a lot of you already have. If you've got salad greens going in your garden, just take the colander from your salad spinner out as your harvesting basket, and then you have one less dish you have to clean. I'm just going to throw together a really simple salad with the ingredients we pulled out of the garden a little while ago. I got kale, butter crunch lettuce, spinach, chives, parsley, and cilantro, which cilantro doesn't really go with lasagna, but I love cilantro, so I'm going to put it in the salad. And I really love fresh herbs just tossed in with the salad greens. I just think it adds a lot to the salad. So really, I'm just going to chop these herbs fairly roughly, tear up these greens into more bite-sized pieces, and just dress them really simply with some oil, a little bit of white wine vinegar, salt, pepper, garlic, and that'll be our salad. So herbs into the bowl. I also like to tear the greens up because I can look for any bits that are maybe not super nice on a green that maybe I missed. But I normally try and do that when I'm picking, but sometimes you just miss things. That's okay. I do really like all of the different textures you get with the variety of things. The kale, you know, is a little bit different than having a butter crunch lettuce. Ooh, the lasagna is beeping on us. It looks so good. Okay, well, the lasagna is ready. I'm gonna cut into it and dish it up. It could probably sit a little bit longer to set up, but it's gonna be just fine. So there we have it, lasagna and salad fresh from the garden. Let me grab a fork and I'll take a bite. So good. If you've never tried lasagna with bechamel, I highly recommend it. And if you have problems with milk like I do, chicken broth in your bechamel instead of milk works wonderfully. Thanks for hanging out with me while I made lasagna today, you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye. Am I in the shot?